Hey, it's Carlo Prusa, and welcome back to Carlo Prusa MMA. Today, I am with a former UFC fighter, a former PFL fighter, Mr. Jesse Ronson, taking on Anthony Njokuani, March 2nd, Kia Center, Orlando, Florida. Jesse, first off, how are you doing, man? Thank you for joining me today. And how did you make the decision? What drove you to want to take the gloves off and fight for Gamebred bare knuckle?
Um, my mixed martial arts career is far from done. I've had a lot of fights. This will be my 40th pro MMA fight, 42nd pro fight overall. Gloves on, gloves off, doesn't matter. I've gotten into a lot of, in high school, it was all bare knuckle thrown down then. So it, it is what it is. It's the next highest step. I don't think at my age that the UFC will take me back, despite having 5 wins in a row, 5 first round finishes. Those days are numbered. So right now I'm just looking at an organization where there's no cap for how much money I can make. I've been to the UFC twice, like you said. I've been to the PFL. Boss man, come on. I tried ONE FC, but they said they don't take people in the UFC that have or people that have losses in the UFC. With the Bellator and PFL merger, or whatever it is, they're already stacked for fighters. So I'm just looking for somewhere to call my home where there's no cap for how much money I can make because I've been doing this for 20 years and it's about time that I start making some money from it. Sure, I'm at the bottom of the totem pole right now when it comes to making money in Gamebred, but hopefully, you know, that can change real quick with a really great performance against a vet and well-known fighter like Anthony Njokuani.
It really seems like Dean and Jorge have something big here. I mean, the shows just keep getting bigger and bigger. I mean, one headline year is Junior Dos Santos, Alan Belcher, huge card to fight on. What appealed you to them? Why do you think they're getting really big? Why are they getting all this attention? And do you think that this promotion could get very high?
Because this is the way fighting should be intended. This is man stuff, bare knuckle. I like that they let you wrap your wrists up. Even if they didn't, I would still do it. But you know what I mean? This is like going back to the days of UFC one, where it's real raw. BKFC is getting a lot of attention because it's bare knuckle boxing. That's like a street fight with honor. You're only using your hands. Well, this is as close to the real thing, defending yourself outside or anywhere where somebody jumps, whatever, it doesn't matter. This is as close to as real fighting can get. And it's the only promotion like this in the world, I think. So everybody wants to see what it's like. I think they did a test one time where like an MMA glove, like a UFC glove, has the same amount of padding as a 10-ounce boxing glove. So it's like these piercing points make a huge difference. And like I said, it's just as close to as real fighting as you can get. Like you saw Jorge back in the day, the backyard fights. Even though that was just, they consented to just using their hands, but still, I like that the pure form of fighting right here, and I
Now,
think all the fans do too.
now you're fighting, as you mentioned, a well-known name in the sport, and Anthony Njokuani, a guy who is a striker. Are you anticipating a potential three-round dogfight here?
Absolutely not. He's a striker. I'm a striker. We're we're fucking fighting bare knuckle. Two guys that want to throw down striking. Somebody's got to go down. Like I can understand, if you're a little hesitant or whatever it is. Like it boggles my mind. Even though I've been to a decision a few times, I've lost more than I've like decisions than I've won decisions, but it just doesn't make any sense to me. Two guys with 4-ounce gloves, let alone no gloves. How can it go 3 rounds unless you're being conservative? Like, stop it. I'm trying to fucking kill you. That's the end of it. And it's been a while for my mental game and mental maturity to catch up to this. And it's finally caught up to my skill level. And that's why I've got, my 5 first-round finishes. But it's like when two guys really want to go at it and really want to fight, there's no way it can go 3 5-minute rounds. And especially two high level strikers like Anthony and myself, somebody's getting put to sleep that night for sure, 100%, because this is it, man. Like there's no playing it safe. I don't know how we went to a decision last time with Brendan Jenkins. It just bare fists, bare shins, bare knees, bare elbows, almost anything fucking goes. Like, how are guys not getting put in the hospital on a deathbed? So I'm coming. I'm coming fast. I'm coming hard. And I guarantee you, Anthony Njokuani will shoot and try to wrestle me first. That's how hard I'm coming.
And now, what have the reactions been like from people when you tell them that you're about to take the gloves off and do some bare knuckle fighting?
They absolutely love it. They said it's about time. They where I'm from, a lot of people know me. It's not like I had a similar raising background to Jorge Masvidal, but they're like, I don't hit pads with wraps. I don't wrap my hands. They're like, man, bare knuckles for you. They know how hard I can hit. And just like I said, the piercing damage of these knuckles is just way different than when you have a glove on that disperses it. And everybody's excited. And I had so much positive feedback from everybody. They've been wanting me to do BKFC since it came out. They've been wanting me to do Gamebred bare knuckle since it came out. I've been hitting up Dean Toole. I even messaged Dustin Poirier at one point. I'm like, hey, can you tell your boy George Masvidal to sign me to Gamebred bare knuckle? He's like, yeah, I'll put in a good word with next time I see him. I've been trying to get with him for a very long time, and it just finally just happened to work out. And yeah, so all this talk and everything else, it's time to put foot to ass.
Now let's talk about how you got into the sport a little bit. You have been doing this for over 20 years, as you mentioned, longtime name in combat sports. How did Jesse Ronson find his way into this crazy world of mixed martial arts?
I started boxing and kickboxing. I wrestled in high school, got in a bunch of altercations in high school, and everyone's like, oh, maybe you should look to do this for a living. Then I started actually training boxing and kickboxing. I've got about 40 or 50 amateur boxing kickboxing fights. The goal was to go forward as a kickboxer, but they just didn't pay well. My first pro kickboxing fight, I made $450. And then about 3 weeks later, I was offered a pro MMA fight where I made double that. And so I was like, if this is, and it was easy. I got a first round knockout in my first MMA fight. So I was like, hey, let's just keep going with this. Um, yeah, you know, the rest is history. I just picked it up, and I love fighting. It doesn't take much. Like, I don't have to change who I am. I know some people, they get in the back, they huff and puff and they move around. For me, it's whether you're my best friend or my worst enemy, it doesn't take much for me to punch you in the face. Um, I just love fighting in all forms, and yeah, it just took off from there.
This current day and age in 2024, obviously mixed martial arts is a huge money-making machine and is very culturally accepted. 15, 20 years ago, maybe not the case, was not as culturally accepted as it is today. When you were
Yeah.
first getting into it, maybe your first amateur contest or first pro contest, do you have any maybe crazy fight stories like promotions with mystery opponents, unsafe fighting conditions, bad medicals? Do you have anything crazy?
There was no medicals back then. Um, I think as an amateur, we needed to do a physical. That was it. Maybe the odd time somewhere, if we were fighting, they would ask for blood, but nah, never. And it was always mystery opponents. I can't remember other than maybe one or two times. Um, I think my second Canadian title, I knew who I was fighting probably 4 or 5 weeks out. Second Canadian kickboxing title. I fought a guy, Pat Pitlick, who's now like 9-1. He's going on the Dana White Contender Series. I fought him for the Canadian title. We knew about that fight. One of my fights in the United States, they told me about, but they lied about his record. It turns out the guy that I was fighting was a New York State Golden Gloves boxing champion and whatever else. He had, hundreds of fights. I still ended up beating him in his hometown, but still, every time I've shown up to an amateur fight, it's like, all right, we've got this guy and this guy. Like, this is how it is. Like, I've shown up to tournaments and it's random all the time, and that's just how it was. All these guys these days coming up, they need to study their opponent. They need 8-week training camps as an amateur. It's like, now you should always be ready to fight as an amateur and whatever else. Because like I said, I've had about 50 amateur fights, and the majority of those fights is like, you show up to the venue and they're like, okay, we got this guy in your weight class, he has this many fights, do you want to do it? It's like, well, I didn't drive all this way not to fight, so yeah, let's get it done. It was only until I turned pro that we actually got to be able to study people. But even then, I turned pro in 2009. There wasn't much information about mixed martial artists. Like, people weren't videotaping everything all the time. So it's like, how much tape can you watch on a guy? So it's like, for my first, I don't know, 10 fights, you just, my skill versus your skill. Right. And then I think to this date, too many people study tape too much. So it is what it is. I don't know. It's hard for me to explain this part, but no matter how much you train or how much you study me, no matter how vast martial arts is or who you have, you're not, you don't have me in the gym. So it's like, you can train for me all you want, but it's not me. And no matter how much you train my style or whatever it is, you're not going to be able to mimic me on fight night. So took me a long time to realize that. And, like I said, I don't have anybody in my gym that's Anthony Njokuani. I have body types, but they're not him. They don't fight like him. I don't know how strong he is, how fast he is, how resilient he is. I just have these guys that can try and mimic him, but they're not him. So I go in there and I just try to impose my will.
When you first began competing and training, what was the mixed martial arts scene like in Ontario?
Um, Kickboxing scene, Muay Thai is dead. Boxing scene was non-existent. Amateur kickboxing was doing okay. Mixed martial arts was getting steam because we had, George St. Pierre. I think he was champion at the time, even though he's from Quebec. It was still huge. But in Canada, if it ain't hockey, people don't give a shit about it, and it pisses me off. We've had multiple champions. We've got huge steam for MMA, but still, if it ain't honky, in Canada, it's like you're not getting sponsors, you're not getting anything. Like hockey takes precedence, and it pisses me off. Why? But I to this day don't know why people love hockey so much. But we had guys like Mark Hominick, Sam Stout, Chris Horodesky. Like Mark Hominick fought for the UFC title. Sam Stout had 20 fights. He was one of the most exciting guys. They were in the UFC in 2008. TKO promotion, which I was double champion, was killing it from 1998 all the way up until 2007, 2008. Like there was a lot of fighting going on. A lot of people knew about it. But again, if it took a backseat to hockey all the time on TV and everything else, which absolutely sucks. So it was kind of like an underground thing.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because if you look at it, obviously the growth in the UFC, how they got to be so big, Dana White and Fertitas, they had to go through a bunch of different hurdles. One of the things was legalizing mixed martial arts in different areas. One that constantly gets brought up is New York. But I think a lot of people underestimate the importance of it being legalized in Ontario. You mentioned
Hmm.
Mark Homnick, 2011, UFC 129. Fought in front of over 50,000 people, Sky Dome against Jose Aldo. That show was massive. St. Pierre headlining it, Jake Shields. How important do you think was the legalization of professional mixed martial arts in Ontario for the development and growth of the sport in Canada?
Absolutely massive. It was absolutely massive. It changed everything. Um, and I'm glad that we have, mixed martial arts is allowed in Ontario. There was a little tobacco or whatever few years back. So amateur MMA is not allowed because certain people were taking advantage of the amateur scene. And essentially they were just matchmaking random dudes. Like I remember being at an amateur show, and it's like every once in a while you would see a sub a sub 10-second knockout. Well, on this one show, there was 6 knockouts in less than 10 seconds. And it's like this guy from the Red Devil backyard and wherever fighting. It was just so many bad mismatches, and they were charging more for tickets than a pro show, and they were just making hand over because they don't have to pay commission fees. They don't have there's nothing. So they were just making hand over fist money. So other people got upset about that. So they just banned amateur mixed martial arts. We got a guy in the office right now, the athletics commissioner, Luke Kotlick. He's very understanding, and he's actually like lowered, not lowered the bar, but made it easier to get like an Ontario mixed martial arts license to put on a show and everything else. When we had Ken Ayashi in charge, it was a pain in the ass. He was pretty much like, "Oh yeah, it's going to cost you about 150 grand." And like, where's the money going? What? He was just throwing out numbers out his fucking ass. He was making fighters. We had to do to get licensed just for MMA, we had to do an EEG, an ECG, an EKG, an MRI, a chest X-ray, a physical, urine, blood work, eye test. We had to do about 10 or 11 things and submit this all within 30 days to get licensed. And then a show, like I said, he said the commission fee was like 50 to 100 grand, depending on how he felt or what weekend it was. If it was a big fishing weekend for him, $100,000 because Ken Hayashi only didn't want to work. He gets paid the same no matter how many shows are on. And then there was a knockout fee or whatever it is, TKO fee that they had to pay. It was just absolutely insane. It was almost next to impossible to run an MMA show in Ontario under Ken Hayashi. So we got Luke now, who makes it very, very easy to run Ontario shows, and he makes it safe. And it's starting to come. We're getting more and more shows like local shows. We have BTC, PFC, like more and more local shows. Whereas back in the day, we had the Score Fighting Series. And the only reason why the Score Fighting Series did well is because they have their TV channel and they were getting major money from Rogers. Other than that, nobody could afford to put on a show because Ken Hayashi set the price way too high because he just didn't want to work these shows, and it sucked. So yeah, we're making progress and it's moving forward. And shows like Mark Hominick fighting for the title, like yeah, these local guys from Ontario are making it to the NFL, NHL of the MMA world and showcasing that yeah, we can do it. We have these guys, we're good. Selling out 50,000 person arenas. Like, okay, well, maybe it's worth, maybe MMA is worth the time in Ontario and we should do something about it, get more shows.
Oh no, absolutely. And another thing, as you mentioned, the hockey, obviously hockey, the Maple Leafs, it's like religion there in Ontario. But early on, like maybe 10 years ago, I mean, the UFC would consistently have big shows. I mean, John Jones has fought in Ontario at the Air Canada Center, I think 3 or 4 times. I tell people I get spoiled. My first ever UFC event that I ever went to was UFC 165, Jones versus
That was my
Gustafsson.
debut.
You were on there as well.
Yeah.
What was it like being, I mean, obviously I'm biased. My opinion, greatest mixed martial arts fight ever, John Jones versus Alex Gustafsson. I'll say it till I'm dead. But what was it like just being able to make a debut on Beyond that card?
It was absolutely phenomenal. And you're right. That was one of the greatest fights ever. To be honest, I thought Alexander Gustafsson won that fight. I thought he got that at for sure 3-2. Uh, but John Jones is the greatest mixed martial artist ever. To me, he's undefeated. But yeah, that it's not my call, but that whole card was absolutely awesome. It was unreal. John Jones was in the hotel room beside mine because so many fanboys, like usually they give the main event like the suite, like the biggest best room, but everybody knows that, and there's fans everywhere trying to get pictures and whatever. So he took the room from one of his coaches, and he was right beside me all week. So it was pretty cool. Every time I got to see him multiple times, and he was actually a super nice guy. Um, but that experience itself was, I've never had anybody like stop me in a hotel lobby, open up a binder and be like, Jesse Ronson, can you sign these pictures? And they had pictures of me from my first MMA fight, like all the way up. And I was like, holy shit. Every day somebody new with different pictures signed. I was like, am I famous? Like what's going on here? Right. And then just being in a room, like they have the red corner, blue corner rooms, just seeing all the guys train and fight and what they're doing. And then my locker room was stacked. I had Khabib in my locker room. I had John Jones in my locker room. I had Matt Mitrione in my locker room. All their team. Mitch Gagnon was in my locker room. Chris Clements, he fought Wonderboy Thompson. Yeah, that whole card was, when you think about it now, the level of star power, it was crazy. I got one of my coaches, who's a retired police officer, Leo. You'd never ever picture this guy with that Khabib white hat. He put it on and we got a picture with Khabib. It was crazy. I got a lot of memories. That was for sure one of the if not the biggest show that I was ever involved in. And it was life-changing experience. It was absolutely awesome.
It's funny you just mentioned Khabib because I was about to ask you, do you remember who took on Pat Healy for the first fight
Yeah.
of the pay-per-view? But even then, man, it was just you watch a guy like Khabib sitting there and it's just different. I mean, you didn't really
Yeah.
know who he was at the time. I think this is only his second or third fight in the UFC. But I
Yeah.
mean, when you saw him, could you tell? I mean, did you get the impression that this guy could mess around and become one of the greatest?
Um, to be honest, his grappling was on point, but it wasn't as tight as it is when he finished. And his striking was, you could tell he did some work with Dan Cormier. Dan Cormier taught him how to use the jab like he brags about, because his striking really wasn't there. But man, that guy was fucking big. I remember doing an interview, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday, like the day before weigh-ins, and like just sitting beside him. And I'm like, is this guy fighting at 170? Like, what's going on? Like, oh, no, 55. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? Like, how is this guy fighting at 50? He was a big dude even back then. And yeah, just I love being in the locker room just to see how different guys warm up and what different people do um, to warm up and what they do to psych themselves up. Like seeing John Jones, like he was doing jump spinning hook kicks to warm up. He didn't throw a single jump spinning hook kick in the fight. And then he had to do or Greg Jackson said they literally had to pause the pay-per-view. Like, John Jones isn't ready. He still has to do his I am the champion bit. And they had to go in their own little private section in the change room, and he had to do it like I can't remember what they were saying, but he would always answer with I am a champion. I am a champion. And then he would go out. Just seeing all that stuff and how every different people prepare is just, it's awesome. I love it. I miss it. Miss being at the high level where you can see that stuff. And I'm glad, Gamebred signed me up because, there's a lot of high level guys that have been to the UFC and are now on Gamebred. Um, so I get to, live it again. And I love being in that atmosphere.
You've mentioned a couple of their names earlier, but what has it been like to be able to trade throughout your whole career with guys like Mark the Machine Hominick, Sam Stout? There's more Chris Clements, all those great Canadian fighters. What is it like to be able to represent Canada and train alongside them?
When I first started, it was a like a pit. I don't even know how to explain it. Like they fought. Like I remember the first time I went there to go sparring in like 2008. Like normally it's like warm up round, take it like nowadays everybody takes it easy. They play touch butt. Like you don't even get marked up. There's not like you maybe break a sweat in sparring these days, but back then every time you sparred it was a fight. Like you're throwing as hard as you can. So I always made sure I went with Mark first because he set the pace for me for the remaining rounds when we did 5 5s or 6 5-minute rounds because it's like you go with him when he's the freshest, it's fucking crazy. And then it's like it just sets the tone for everything else you did. But a lot of people are complaining about brain damage now and everything else, like going too hard in sparring. I can see it. I don't poke. I'm not saying this as a poke to my guys because they're my family, they're my training partners. But I think they sparred too hard too often when they were younger, and it attributed to most of them retiring at 30 or before. Like Mark retired at 30 or 31. Sam had to retire at 30, 31. Hordeski retired at 27, 28. It's because they, for 15 years, 3 times a week, twice with big gloves and once with small gloves, they would just beat the shit out of each other. And we were the staple gym in Ontario. So everybody within a 3 4 hour radius, when we sparred, whether it be Tuesday, Thursday, or Saturday morning, we would come. We would have 40, 50 guys in the gym sparring. So all different weights and everything else, all of them getting a rude awakening if it was their first time there, or others knowing that they came to fight. And it was like, I don't give a fuck about you. This is my gym. You want to come here? This is what happens. And it was like defending the territory. So yeah, there's a lot of hard sparring. And luckily for me, I'd like to say that I'm a little smarter than most people. And my defense is I've never been knocked unconscious. I've been TKO'd, but I've never been knocked unconscious. I've been rocked. But like back then, I was focused a lot on head movement and defense, working my counters, working my smart pressure, and it's paid dividends. And it's definitely going to help me out in this fight versus Anthony Njokuani.
Is there a chance maybe any of those guys are going to come and corner you in Orlando?
I have my corner set already, but Chris Hordeski is coming down because he fought Anthony Njokuani back in the day, and he definitely wants me to get some revenge for him. And I definitely want to get some revenge for him. Like that turnaround, getting head kicked, TKO'd, or knocked out is, people still use it as on their highlights. So it's like, hopefully I can erase that. And I know, Chris has got, a lot of hope for me. And there's everybody thinks I can do it. We're both older, Anthony and I, but he's a little older than me, and I'm for sure gonna make something out of it.
With this being your first bare knuckle contest, one thing that is obviously a risk in bare knuckle, guys going in there, throwing very hard and breaking their hands. Is
Mm.
there any mindset? Are you doing anything maybe to try to prevent that?
Yeah, I'm training bare knuckle right now. I don't spar bare knuckle. I spar with the MMA gloves, but I hit the bag bare knuckle. I hit pads bare knuckle. I used to train with a guy back in the day. His name was Gord Riddle, and he is the biggest, strongest. He's broken people's hands being a pad holder, like just holding the mitts, just the amount of force that he gives back. He's broken people's hands before. And it's like I remember training with him, like my hands would like violently shake after I was done. And that's with gloves. Like I've been training my hands to be strong. I've never broken my hand, knock on wood, you know. I've had some dislocations and everything else, but I have confidence in my hands that if I were to hit somebody even on the top of the head, their head would break before my hand. I have insanely strong. You can ask anybody when they say like I have Popeye forearms. I have insanely inhumanly strong grip and really dense and strong hands. Like I said, knock on wood. Hopefully that doesn't change when I punch Anthony Njokuani. But I have absolutely no fear when I ball these up and throw them that my hand's not going to break. It
And
hasn't yet, and I've done some pretty stupid shit in the ring, in the cage, on the street, in training, just randomly. And yeah, nothing's broken yet. So
In addition to the risk of breaking hands, another byproduct of the bare knuckle MMA game, is it making it harder to defend takedowns and to control the grappling without the gloves on?
Absolutely not. With no glove on, your hands can slide in places easier. There's less for people to hold on to, sure. Like when you're on somebody has a hold of you, people grab the gloves, they do it all the time. Natan Schultz must have had his fingers more time spent with his fingers inside my glove, holding me, throwing me around than he did with his fingers outside the glove in PFL. It was fucking bullshit. But yeah, just being able to slide my hand in and out, like especially for wrestling, it doesn't change. Nothing really changes. It'll make it easier to slide in a submission and make it easier to slide my hands into places. Uh, Anthony's not much of a grappler from what I've seen or a wrestler. I think I've seen him shoot a couple of sloppy takedowns. He doesn't really have much on the ground, but again, like I said, he's going to have nothing to worry about there because it's going to be on the feet. And like I said, he's probably going to shoot first. I know he likes to clinch and throw knees, being the taller, longer guy with the Muay Thai style. It plays right into his game, but we'll see. Like I said, we will see fight night what happens.
With a big win over a guy like Anthony Njokuani, where do you think that puts you in the MMA scene?
Uh like I said, we're both older now. It's like the allure and illustriousness of Anthony Njokuani has faded. If I was him, I would have retired after I beat Andy Sauer. That's a huge win. The biggest of the biggest things. But maybe he loves to fight. Maybe he needs money. I don't know. Beating Anthony Njokuani will definitely make a stake for me to say, hey, I want more money. Like, not that Gamebred has the resources that UFC does or whatever else, but they can definitely afford to pay me more than what I'm getting paid. So a big win against a guy like Anthony Njokuani will net me, a better payday. There's another welterweight fight on there. There's a UFC vet, Brendan Jenkins and Tyler something, I can't remember.
Collar Hill.
It sets it up. So I beat Anthony Njokuani. Give me the winner of that fight in May or June. I want to fight 4 times this year. I want to stay busy, So, right, it sets me up there. And then Francisco Trinaldo is also bare knuckle MMA. I would love to get that fucking rematch. I like Trinaldo. We follow each other. We talk to each other sometimes. He's a great guy, but again, I lost a split decision in Brazil to him. And it's just a fight that I would love to get back. And it can happen in Gamebred. But like I said, I know he's getting paid. So they make that fight. I win this fight against Njokuani. I win another fight. Maybe we'll do Trinaldo, maybe Trinaldo title fight. Who knows? But yeah, I know he's getting paid. So for a fight like that, I want to get paid too. But you can't just ask for money. You got to showcase why you're worth that money. So like I said, this fight and another fight, shit could happen.
Another thing people I don't think really realize who watch combat sports is the sacrifices needed to be a mixed martial artist. I mean, in all honesty, unless you're one of the bigger names in the UFC, I mean, the money you're making is nothing crazy, especially if you're going around on the regional scene. I can only imagine in Canada what it would be like, but the money's just not there. There's a lot of sacrifices. A lot of people have to do this, have kids, and they have wives, and they have to have a 40-hour job just to keep their training going and be able to do their hobby of fighting, if you will. How do you overcome those sacrifices? And do you feel like that has motivated you throughout your career?
It's a huge motivation. For me, it was all about making it, and then it was all about the money. And then yeah, I lost it's the passion for fighting is what it is. And I'll fight for whatever. But yeah, you're right. I want to get paid now. And even fighting in the States, like I'm losing 50% of my money from this show. I don't know how Gamebred does it or whatever it is, but usually 30% state taxes, 10% goes to my management, 10% goes to my coaches. So I'm already fighting for half of my money, which is fucking ridiculous. And I'm not even making that much money. So it's like, well, I'm going out there fighting for half already. In Canada, luckily there's no 30% tax, but I got to pay taxes on that at the end of the year. It's even this money that I'm making in the States for this fight, I got to pay taxes on it back home in Canada. So it's difficult. And like I said, in Canada, it's hard to find sponsors unless you're making big waves, big name for yourself. Um, if it ain't hockey, people don't give a shit about it. I've reached out when I was in the PFL $1 million tournament when it was fresh and it was big and it was on TSN and everything. I reached out to a bunch of Canadian companies. I'm like, hey, Jesse Ronson here, veteran mixed martial arts, UFC vet. I'm fighting the PFL $1 million tournament, listed out all this where they could get it. And all these Canadian companies are like, oh yeah, sorry, we're not interested. Like we've spent all our budget on hockey or this and that. I know I reached out to ASICS one time and they're like, well, we just spent the rest of our money on the wrestling team. I'm like, well, at least you're sponsoring somebody other than fucking hockey players. So I'm okay with that. But supplement companies, everything else, it's just if you ain't a hockey player, they're just really not interested. This time around, I've reached out to like Bodog. There's Bodog Canada, the betting site, because they sponsored 6 or 7 guys in the UFC for UFC Canada. So I messaged them. Hopefully they get back to me and sponsor me. That'd be great. But yeah, it's this training camp for this fight. I started a GoFundMe just to help not pay. I don't want people to cover my bills. Just cover the training expenses, like gas, because I train out of town 3 times a week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So I'm driving there and back. So it's 3 hours of driving there and back. Like, so an hour and a half there, an hour and a half back, plus the training. And then I go back another day, same thing. And then back another day, same. So gas is expensive in Canada. It's ridiculous. Food is expensive in Canada because of inflation, Justin Trudeau. It's ridiculous. I had to pay, because we don't have privatized healthcare. Um, when we go do our medicals, if we need it done, they know we need it done, so they can charge whatever. I had to pay $200 for an EEG. I got to pay $500 for an ophthalmologist exam. So I can see an optometrist to get my Ontario license. I did $90, but an ophthalmologist exam, because that's all, Florida State or the United States takes $500 fucking dollars. I got to drive to Toronto. So 2.5 hour drive there, give this guy $500 for 45 minutes work and a 2.5 hour drive back. I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I told everybody that I'm like, hey, this GoFundMe and all your sponsorships is just here to help, ease the cost of training for me and medical bills and everything else. Like, I'll take care of me. You guys just take care of the training. And you know what? I get more support from my friends and family and, random fans than I do sponsors. Luckily, this GoFundMe actually got me a couple of sponsors, but again, nothing you would bat an eye at. If I told you the price, you'd be like, that's not sponsorship money. Like, what is that? That's just the people. It's like handout money, but to me, it's sponsorship money.
All right,
So,
last question for you, Jesse. In a
yeah.
perfect world, what goes down March 2nd, my man?
Boy, perfect world. Jesse Ronson knocks out Anthony Njokuani in the first round or submits him in the first round because Anthony Njokuani gets hurt and tries for a takedown. And I submit him and I continue my streak. 6 fights, 6 first round finishes all in a row. And yeah, then I get on the mic and I ask to fight the winner of that other fight. And Dean Toole and George Masvidal say, yeah, let's do it. And they give it to me in May. That would be a perfect world right there, which May or June, which lines me up. I can fight in month 3, month 6, month 9, and month 12. And yeah, pay increases exponentially each time. And I get a bigger fan base, bigger sponsors come in. And I don't have to worry about very much anymore.
Well, Jesse, thank you for coming on, man. I wish nothing but the best for you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
That's Jesse Ronson. I'm Carlo Prusa. Stick around.